Politicians, either represent the people or get out.
We're here because 17 lives were lost from our school, and it's time for change.
The people of this country now see past the lies. We've seen this narrative before. For the first time, the corrupt aren't controlling our story. We are. The corrupt are manipulating the facts. We know the truth. Shooting after shooting, the American people now see one thing they all have in common: the weapons.
Do you feel like this rally is promoting change?
I honestly don't know. I mean, I know a lot of voices are being heard, especially up at the podium.
Yeah.
But it all depends on the politicians in office, you know?
Yeah.
Everyday proud. My name is Trevon Bosley, and I'm here with the brave youth leaders of St. Sabina. And I'm here to speak on behalf of Chicago's youth who are surrounded and affected by gun violence every day. I'm here to speak for those youth who fear they may be shot while going to the gas station, the movies, the bus stop.
Heartbreaking day in Florida, and sadly an all too familiar one.
How many more students are going to have to die just because politicians refuse to take action?
This has happened so many times, and so many times all we get are thoughts and prayers.
I can only say tonight that the prayers of the American people are with you. Hearts go out and prayers go out.
I come to offer the love and prayers of the nation.
Here at the White House, the victims and families have constantly been in our thoughts and prayers.
The adults let us down. At this point, they're going to be gone by midterm election because you are either with us or against us at this point.
Students are expected to walk out of their schools.
Now, hundreds of students coming outside their
These are student-organized events, really powered by social media.
starting to realize, wait, why is no one in Washington doing anything?
We're children. You guys are the adults. You need to take some action.
I think this gun-controlled discussion right now, this is not the time to have the discussion.
This is not the time for this. It's not the time.
The shooter at our school obtained weapons that he used on us legally.
I do not think that he should have gotten his hands on any kind of weapon.
This type of weapon has been used in other shootings.
We want privatized selling to be completely reformed, so you can't just walk into a building with $130 and walk out with an AR-15.
To buy this type of weapon, it's not the weapon, it's the evil from within. Thoughts and prayers are really the only thing that's going to stop the evil from within the individual.
They can walk around any question they want, but the more they don't act, the more they don't deserve to be in office.
These kids who are fighting their hearts out, who are showing us what makes America great, they will take care of it if no one else does.
Senator Rubio, can you tell me right now that you will not accept a single donation from the NRA?
The children to tell us that we should pass a law that says no homework. No. The adults make the laws because we have the wisdom and we have the experience.
We will accept nothing less than comprehensive gun control.
Say your name. Sure. Claudia Schwarzberg.
Wayne Kahn.
I was wondering why you guys chose to volunteer at this event.
So we live in Washington, D.C., so this is our hometown. And so it's pretty easy for us to come to rallies or protests. And so this is just one way of supporting people who are coming farther away, who have to travel, who are on buses all night, to support them and for a cause that we believe in.
Okay.
It's our one chance to, since we don't have an official vote, to show our support for those that come here that would like to see us have a vote.
Right.
And have you guys volunteered at rallies like this before?
We've done other things like house people,
Okay.
and and we've come to rallies, but I think it's the first time we officially decided to volunteer. Anyway, they give us cool hats and t-shirts.
Is this the biggest one you've seen?
No.
No. Okay.
No. I'm a child of the 60s, so when I lived outside of DC, I came here to march against the war in Vietnam, and there were one rally, I think there was 1 million people on the mall. We were here at the Women's March. And what's really exciting about this is that there's a whole new generation of young people who are taking leadership, and they are going to make real change in this country, and so we want to support that as well.
So what do you hope this accomplishes?
So people will go back, I think, to their communities and organize, and a lot of people who were maybe not motivated to vote will be voting, they'll be lobbying, they'll be meeting with their representatives, holding people accountable, and supporting both stronger gun legislation and also candidates who will stand up to the NRA. So we really think that this is going to make a change.
And to keep the discussion from fading away as past discussions have, and give it that energy to keep moving forward. That's its hopefully biggest takeaway.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is India Mazzaro, and I'm going to be talking about my involvement in the March for Our Lives protest in Washington, D.C. The March for Our Lives protest and rally occurred on Saturday, March 24th at noon on Pennsylvania Avenue in D.C. This was not the only movement. Movements occurred around the nation and actually around the world in support of this main rally in D.C. The D.C. rally itself amassed hundreds of thousands of people, and offshoots of the rally popped up in Boston, Los Angeles, San Francisco, New York City, Parkland, Florida, which was where the shooting that sparked the entire movement occurred, Australia, Spain, and the UK, and there were multiple others. These were just some of the ones that I'd specifically seen on the news. There were a lot of causes that sparked the event, but I'm just going to talk about a couple of them that I think are really the most important as to why this rally popped up. It was sparked specifically after the shooting of 17 kids and a few teachers in Parkland, Florida. Mainly young kids became sick of having to worry about their lives simply while going to school, because school should be a place of respite from whatever issues you're having at home. It should be a place of learning. The kids at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, which were the kids that organized this event, it was where the shooting occurred. They're very well educated. It's a fairly affluent neighborhood and high school in Florida. The students from this school came together and spoke up about the lack of government regulation around guns and concern for the number of mass shootings occurring in schools in recent years. These students spoke up for previous schools that didn't, such as Columbine and Sandy Hook. And I think part of what allowed this movement to become so successful is the affluency of the kids, because they're well educated. I know that my high school was fairly well educated, and it was in a fairly affluent neighborhood, and I think if the same thing happened, we probably would have come together in the same way, because a lot of us are very educated. Our parents are pretty politically active, and I think kids in the more affluent neighborhoods don't have as much other things to worry about, so they can sort of come together and really mobilize for this issue, whereas people in Southeast DC or areas of LA, they're worried about just staying alive in their neighborhood, so they can't really come together and organize an event like this, because even if there was a mass shooting, they're worrying about just getting shot in their neighborhood. So I think that's part of why this movement was able to become so successful and why it was so well organized, and it came up pretty quickly after the event. Students mobilized to actively demand common sense gun laws. They specifically wanted to ban assault-style weapons and high-capacity magazines, and that's what they had said at the actual rally. They had a period where they specifically went over their demands, just, I think, to show the government what they want, to make them seem more of a serious movement. They also wanted to have background checks tightened so that not just anyone can get a gun, because it's fairly well known that it's pretty easy to just acquire a gun, and they really feel that needs to be changed. And then one of the main things that they wanted to do was encourage young voters to vote out politicians that go against or don't actively support the movement. So, for example, like Paul Ryan, they think he should not be senator because of this issue. He's allowing the NRA to make donations, and he's being bought by the NRA. One of the main chants at the rally was actually vote them out, and I think that's going along the lines of this same idea, is that the politicians are who they work for us, so we should be voting them out if they don't go with our ideas. A main organizer of the event, David Hogg, he was the one that was actually accused of being a crisis actor. He's been one of the most active voices in this whole rally and whole event. He said that this march signifies a bad day for tyranny and corruption, and then he said if you listen closely, you can hear those in power shaking. Many of the organizers really demanded drastic change that puts young lives ahead of party affiliation and all politics. Because in reality, the kids are the ones that matter. We shouldn't be caring about your party affiliation. And although the movement kind of centered around safety within schools, I think one of the really good things that they did was brought in speakers from low-income neighborhoods in DC, Chicago, and South LA, and these students advocated for safety not only within schools, but within their neighborhoods where kids get shot walking to school or walking to the grocery store, and they demand more government support for low-income neighborhoods. Because in reality, those are the ones that, although the mass shootings are more high profile, those are the ones that are facing this every day, and it really affects their ability to get jobs and be successful in life. So this rally did a really good job of including those people because they're a really invisible group, but they're really important. This rally used a lot of different techniques, but I'm going to go over some of them. One of their main techniques was using social media as a tool for mass mobilization. Since this movement was mostly targeted at mobilizing the youth, the organizers of the protests instantly took to social media both to speak out about their individual trauma, which is something that Emma Gonzalez did when she made video diaries of her experience after the crisis, and to mobilize international March for Our Lives rallies, which really succeeded. They created a Facebook group, emails, RSVPs for creating your own movement, and I think by doing that, it allowed more people to be involved without having to specifically find their own way. If you're on Facebook and you see that you can start your own rally, you might be more willing to. They also used celebrities to promote their cause because a lot of celebrities are fairly liberal and support these causes, these type of things when they do happen. So celebrities like Miley Cyrus, Demi Lovato, Amy Schumer, and Paul McCartney were all at rallies. Some of them spoke or performed, which I think drew more people in who maybe just wanted to see the celebrities and then actually decided they supported the cause. Another celebrity of a different sort was Martin Luther King's granddaughter, who spoke at one of the events, and she really was there to mobilize support from all races and walks of life and sort of to promote the peaceful values of her grandfather. So appreciative inquiry is something that we talked about in class, and I think the DC rally kind of used a lot of that because the theory of appreciative inquiry states that the most important resource we have for generating organizational change or improvement are our collective imagination and discourse about the future. And I think the speakers at the rally all had a hopeful view for the future and imagined a world where kids wouldn't have to die in school or while walking to school. And even though the topic of the rally and the rally itself was a fairly depressing, and it's a sad event, I mean it is, but I think they were able to focus on the positives and think, what can we change? It wasn't a mournful event, I didn't think. I thought they really did a good job of trying to make it positive and a hopeful view for the future, which I think gives the people who attend the rally more hope and more of a desire to make change and empower them individually. I think they used an intersectional approach to garner more support for their cause, mainly because, like what I talked about earlier, how they brought in speakers from all walks of life to speak about their experience with gun violence. By doing this, they gained support from more groups. I noticed that Black Lives Matter groups came out in full force during the event. Because blacks are disproportionately affected by gun violence, both from police and people within their neighborhoods' gang violence. And by having these kids speak at the event, they gain support from groups who may not be focused on violence within schools, but in their own neighborhood, which would give them still the same kind of support for gun control. For example, in Chicago, they're more worried about getting shot on their way to school than in the actual school, but they feel heard at this event. By bringing many different races and income levels, the organizers of the event sought to show that gun violence is not reserved for any specific group. It can happen to anyone, and the only way to bring about change is through political and legal means that restrict the actual access to guns. One thing I also noticed was that there was a group called Gays Against Guns, I believe, and they were there because those types of people are affected too. It really just goes to show that this is not a political issue necessarily. It is just a moral issue, and it's something that affects everyone, whether you support the use of guns or gun control or not. And Chenoweth is someone that we had read about in class, and she states that nonviolence resistance tends to fail when there's not enough resilience or when there's not a diverse enough membership. And the March for Our Lives rally is kind of a poster child of a successful nonviolent resistance campaign, because I think the organizers were really resilient against all the different obstacles that were thrown their way, and they were able to garner support from people from all walks of lives. I noticed that there were people of different races, ages, and economic situations that were at the rally, but then they also had all those different groups speak on the actual stage, and I think they came together beautifully. The organizers of this event definitely faced some challenges, and in this section I'm going to go over just some of the main ones that I had heard about and maybe offer some solutions to them. There was actually a challenge right at the beginning of organizing the protest that a lot of people don't know about it. It was the organizers actually had to change the location of the rally after they had already put it on Facebook and had gotten many, many RSVPs, because the National Mall was already booked for a small protest on the day of the event, and it was only about 6 people that had booked the National Mall, but it's still, you have to follow those rules, and I think that was a good thing that they did. They were quick on their feet in finding another place, and they didn't let that sort of turn them down and make them think that they should just give up. Some other challenges, there were counter-protesters that came out in support of the NRA and Second Amendment rights. As expected, I really would have been shocked if I had seen none of them. These challenges, I think, were overcome pretty easily because simply due to the mass numbers that came out in support of the rally, hundreds of thousands of people versus like maybe 1,000 protesters, it doesn't make as much of a dent as it could in a smaller scale protest. And so the supporters vastly overshadowed the dissenters. And in addition, many well-educated people argued with the protesters, which kind of garnered support from all around. And they kind of, they probably didn't change the protesters' mind, but they still allowed them to see some new points of view and just didn't let them protest for no reason. And as with any big event, you kind of can't plan the actual speakers and the stage perfectly. And one example of this is when one of the speakers who was actually injured in the Parkland shooting and who had seen one of her classmates get killed, she vomited on stage and kind of held up the schedule, and just on international television she had vomited, and she dealt with it really well by kind of making a joke and just continuing her speech, which was really impassioned. And this resilience only made her speech more impactful, and I think it resonated nationwide or worldwide that she cares strongly enough about this to not just give up when something embarrassing happens. In addition, social media opposition campaigns have popped up to discredit the movement and its organizers, such as, like I talked about earlier, the crisis actor issue. And then there was another issue of one girl had her photo taken for a magazine, and it showed her ripping up a target, like a gun target. And it was edited to show her ripping up the Constitution, and it was simply to promote a conservative policy towards guns and kind of discredit them. And although this is unacceptable, I think the strength and resilience of this movement makes it less susceptible to these kind of smear campaigns, judging just by the continued success of the rally and all the people that have come out in support of it. Just kind of goes to show that, like, these attempts are going to fail because this is an issue that so many people care about, especially young people. I've seen news about a convention hosted by the NRA to try to deal with this gun issue, and their big suggestion was to ban violent video games, and that's something that I've seen on social media kind of coming up, like, oh, let's just ban those. Like, if you're trying to protest guns, let's just ban video games. And this idea has been a slight challenge for the group because it kind of is trying to move the blame from guns and public policy to surrounding video games or programmers or other groups. And I think the most important thing that activists have to do is stay focused on the main goal and continue to promote their cause. And it's important for them not to get bogged down by outside campaigns that their whole goal is to take attention away from the major issue and kind of move blame around. And I think if they stay focused on the main goal, those kinds of things will just not work at all. And overall, I think this rally went about as well as it could have, garnering international support. And I think the movement could have fizzled out. I know other type of movements have, but the resilience of these students organizing the event kept it strong and made it grow larger than many other rallies could have. And I think their affluency and ability to have the resources to garner this kind of support really helped as well, which they're the more powerful are really, in this case, bringing a voice to those who are less powerful and allowing them to speak up about this issue. Now I'm going to talk about some reflections and lessons that I learned while going to this protest. I've never actually been to a large-scale protest before. I've actually never been to any type of protest, which is something that I've wanted to go to. It just hasn't happened, and so I think for this class, having to do that really made me now want to go to more. It was amazing to see so many people come together in support of a common cause. Never seen anything like it, and it really gave me hope for the future of our country. And I think it gave hope for a lot of the kids who were there. Just seeing those type of movements tend to mobilize people. I think it becomes all too easy to be complacent in the decisions of the government and kind of think that they just rule us and we can do all this. But this rally reminded me that I have a voice and I should be using it. I learned that many different speakers makes an event resonate more with multiple different groups of people, therefore making the event more powerful for everyone and increasing the ability to make change. I think you always need to have lots of different groups because that's what, if you want the support of multiple people, especially in gun violence where it's an issue that affects so many people, you need to show these people that it matters for them. If they're in a low-income neighborhood in Chicago, they're still being affected by this and the government should do something about it. One thing I noticed at the rally was the number of very young kids who came out in support of this movement, regardless of whether they're old enough to vote or not. And I think this will create a very politically active generation in the future, so change will definitely come. I don't know if it'll be as instantaneous as some people would like, but I do think once those kids get old enough to vote, we're definitely going to see some changes. It was also very eye-opening to see older people at the rally, because most of the older people I know are pro-gun, they're very conservative, and it's a good reminder to myself, who can sometimes be biased against older people, that not everyone feels the same way as some of the members of my family. There are older people who feel that this is not right as well. I actually interviewed some older people who were volunteers at the event because they want to help make a difference. And I think that's an important thing to keep in mind, especially because I know I have this bias. And it's so easy to get to DC. There's protests that occur almost daily. I should probably be going to them more often just to learn and get experience. And I think finally the biggest thing that struck me was the powerful nature of some of the speakers that really resonated with me and the people I went with, especially those who have to deal with violence and gun issues on a regular basis, like those from DC and South LA, which are both riddled with crime and a lot of gang violence. It makes the case that gun reform isn't even all about the threat of mass shootings as much it's about the threat of violence that young children have to deal with on a day-to-day basis in inner city neighborhoods, which is unbelievable, especially when you kind of think about all of the money that the US puts into foreign issues. Makes me realize we should probably focus on our own issues of these kids we don't hear about Chicago on the news very much, or parts of DC, and I think that's another important aspect. Overall, this project, I think, was really helpful, teaching me to go to a protest. I had to interview some people. I actually tried to interview a student from Columbine, and she said no, but it was still interesting to just see all of those people come together and learn how to interview people and ask for interviews and film the interviews and then put it together and sort of reflect on it after the fact. I think that was a really good thing, and I think I learned a lot from this project. Thank you.